Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our third Thursday Common Sense Parenting Facebook Live. My name is Gabby, joined here today with not one but two wonderful guests, and we are going to be discussing vaping. So I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves first. Most of you know Bridget Barnes, our Common Sense Parenting expert. Bridget, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a great day here in Omaha. And I'm really super excited about this conversation, but because it's been coming up in our classes and parents are asking about it. So I'm so very excited to be talking today with you guys about this important topic.
Wonderful. And we're also joined here with Natasha. Natasha, if you'd please introduce yourselves and tell us more about your role at Boys Town.
Yeah, Natasha Robinson. I am the director of our chemical use program here at the Boys Town campus at the Behavioral Health Clinic here at Boys Town. So I've been with Boys Town for 20 years. We run a clinic where we provide outpatient services to youth within the community for substance use and associated mental health concerns. So glad to be here today.
Yes, thank you so much. So April is Substance Abuse Prevention Month and Awareness Month. So with that, we're talking about vaping today, but I want to let everyone know that we have so much coverage of other topics that relate on our website, boystownparenting.org. So we will link some resources throughout this conversation in the comment section. And you can always go to our website and search by keyword, whether it's alcohol, vaping, tobacco use, cigarettes, the list goes on, and you can find resources there as well. So as we go through the discussion questions today, if you have a question for Bridget or Natasha as we're discussing, go ahead and leave it in the comment section of this video and we can answer live. And if you're watching this video later on, maybe after the live concludes, you can always message our page if you have a follow-up question. So the first one is, what is vaping and how does it differ from other types of smoking like cigarettes and juuling? Natasha, if you would answer.
Yeah, the main difference between smoking and vaping is that smoking delivers nicotine by burning tobacco, and vaping delivers nicotine by heating a liquid up. And that involves other ingredients and chemicals that has to combine so that it does get heated up. The level of nicotine in a vape is different than obviously smoking nicotine tobacco. The amount of nicotine in a vape can be altered and changed. So if someone's using it, they might be using a higher amount, leading to a tolerance that can be gained a little bit different than maybe smoking cigarettes or tobacco.
And could you explain for our viewers what are some of the health effects of vaping?
Yes. So some of the main ones we see that you might see fairly easily, it almost looks like a cold. So coughing, there's dry mouth and throat, headaches, mouth or throat irritation, sometimes shortness of breath. These side effects are associated with the inhaling of that vapor. And also associated with smoking as well. But that vapor that comes into your lungs, we've seen there's more infection or illnesses that occurs with individuals that are using vaping. That's because it lowers the body's ability to really fight infections associated with using the nicotine. There's also a concept called popcorn lungs. That is when the scars build up from the juice and it destroys the airway flow. And so it's a little bit harder for breathing. So the concept of popcorn lungs comes into play. And generally that's from the flavoring. So with vaping and adding that nicotine in, there can be flavoring added, and there's a lot of additional chemicals that are used in that. And so that's where some of that popcorn lungs can come in. Additionally, with other ingredients, there's been findings that there's actually medical particles in the vape smoke, like formaldehyde. So there's a lot of different chemicals that are combining for that inhalant.
That is scary stuff. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
As a mom, I'm like, really? This is not good on any front.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So kind of on the other side here, Bridget, could you discuss some of the behavioral effects of smoking? You know, the big question is when we hear about all these side effects is, why are kids doing it? And why is it appealing? Why do they choose those behaviors? If you want to explain that a little bit.
Well, I knew I was going to be talking to Natasha, and wanted to do my due diligence to look up enough information, but also talk to other parents. And, some discussions we found out, kids are more likely to smoke more later. The vaping doesn't slow that down. People think, oh, if they're vaping, then that's better than smoking. And in actuality, not. That's not the case. And it also research shows that it increases their anxiety and their attention, their tension. Sometimes when people smoke, whether it's tobacco or vaping, they get this kind of instantaneous feeling of being soothed or, feeling less stressed. But it's a temporary fix, and they instantly have withdrawal symptoms of craving, and also it just
Mhm,
poor to their health, as Natasha just got through
mhm.
pointing out to us. And I was going to ask you, Natasha, I was like, is this a chicken and the eggs situation where, is it because I have kind of, we find that kids have more mental health issues like feeling anxious, having more tension, or did they have that before, or did the smoking cause that? I mean, I really felt like, wow, was I going around in circles over some of this research that showed that kids are really at risk on every front if they get into the cycle of vaping?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the child.
Mm,
So the chicken and the egg is a good example. Some may already have some of those symptoms, and then using the nicotine exasperates them. And others, and research has shown this, that may not have ever had anxiety or depression, but once they get into that routine of nicotine use, the addiction sets in. And
mm,
then there's an obsessive compulsion to want to do it, not only in your mind, but your body, because we know it's physically addicting.
right.
And then come the symptoms of depression and anxiety and inability for that control, and a lot of preoccupation, trying to get it, trying to find it. When's their next? When are they going to fiend? And that's kind of the concept we hear kids talking about. They'll say the word, I'm fiending, or do you have a fiend? And we really challenge that, because that's a word. Let's define that word for you, for these kids, and talk about what does fiending feel like. And it really is a scary concept, although they use it as a term.
Mhm.
They really do have an immense need for it. We call it a craving. There's an immense need to want to get that nicotine if they haven't had it, because their body is getting so used to it, and it's impacting the brain.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So let's talk about age range. Is there an age range that vaping is more popular? Is it middle school? Is it high school? Is it both? Younger, older?
Well, I looked up a little information on this, and I'm sure Natasha can chime in here and correct me, but it seemed like teenagers between the ages of 15 and 17, according to research, had a 1,600% higher chance of vaping than people 25 to 34.
Mhm.
So it seems to be a kind of a trendy thing among teenagers to want to vape, right? And they were showing like that number is just increasing. In 2022, it was 1,800%, and the number just continues to grow at an astronomical rate, I think, for these young people in vaping. What are your thoughts, Natasha, on this?
Yeah, I think we've seen an exasperating trend. And what we're seeing in clinic is a onset even younger than that. So
Oh,
we're seeing some
wow.
middle school, 13, 14, some of that exposure really early on. So yeah, we're concerned about that. We want to continue to educate and prevent as much of that, yeah, of their use that we can, because we're seeing that at an earlier onset. And we've had some schools even calling in, hey, when should we start educating our kid on this? And we're at the point now where we're saying absolutely 12, 13, we want to start educating, because they're going to be exposed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even just exposed to, but also like marketed towards. So much of the
Right.
market in the world for vaping in particular, they make it sound so
Yes.
appealing with all of the flavors, and they make it seem glamorous in a way compared to, dirty, gross cigarettes. But it's like
Right.
it said, it's not any better. So,
Right.
And I would say we can't, just wait on education, schools to educate our children. And the parents have to have those tools, have
Yes.
to have that information. I think sometimes we're oblivious to these numbers and to these issues that are facing our kids, and have some misinformation. And so I think parents should be on the front line and educating their children about what this can do to their bodies and what's good for them and what's not, and really keeping an eye on that.
Yes.
mhm. So, when they those kids are exposed, why, Natasha, do they continue doing it instead of it being like a one-time thing? Is it societal pressure, peer pressure, not being educated enough on the risks, or what are you seeing in the clinic?
So a combination of, I think the curiosity is kind of what starts, and there might be some curiosity. As you mentioned, there's some flavors, candy type flavors that kind of ignite an interest in it. I do think we have to really acknowledge here it's a highly addictive substance. And so kids that get into what we would call kind of some experimentation, depending how much nicotine they're getting, their body is going to respond. And that's the concern, that once they might get into it a little bit, they might actually kind of get hooked in there a little bit because of that nicotine and that tolerance that they might develop. There's a peer culture we're hearing that promotes that. And so for kids that might be a little uncertain or not sure what they want to do, that could lead into that choice to do it, even though they might know it might not be good. I'm not so certain. And then they fall into it because of the peer culture that's there. So we're really trying to give kids those tools that in their toolbox to say, no, I don't want to do that, so that they don't even fall into that where they become, and it becomes habitual for them.
Yeah, and two things I saw was, the FOMO, the fear of missing out. All my friends are doing it. This is a cool thing. Everybody is, you know, uh, everything's telling me to do this, and I must be missing out on something here. So the kids are getting that messaging. And I think, we're coming out of a pandemic. We're coming out of a time where we see that they're more anxious, they're more tense, they have mental health issues. And so maybe also turning towards something that makes them feel calmer and, less stressed out. So I think, it's kind of this perfect storm that's happening between, these marketers and people targeting them, their friends and this popularity, and their own emotional and mental health.
Yes. And when you say that, Bridget, there's been some studies that COVID actually, the numbers of use for nicotine was decreased for young people.
Mm.
And after the pandemic we're still in it, but as it's gotten better and kids are going back to school, there has been an increase.
Wow.
So that's definitely a piece of it. Definitely a piece of it.
Yeah. So, Natasha, based on what you have been helping children and families with through our chemical use program, I know we touched on this just a little bit in the beginning, but oftentimes does vaping accompany other issues like anxiety and depression?
Yes, it does. And recent studies have really backed that. There's a preoccupation that these young individuals will have regarding getting it, acquiring it, when's their next hit, making sure they have the device. And it's taking away their focus from other things, whether it be academics, whether it be family time. Depression and anxiety start to kind of creep in once that addiction kind of hits. Again, kind of how it's changing the chemicals in the brain, and that desire and that urgency, not only mental but physical. So we've been seeing a lot more of young people with some of that depression and anxiety. Some that haven't experienced, and others that may have already had some of those symptoms, but they're kind of exasperating because of their preoccupation or their addiction to the nicotine.
Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested to hear more too. We discussed at the beginning the health effects and on breathing, and you got to think, what about all these kids who are involved in all these school sports? That's got to negatively influence those, right?
Right, because the lungs, and some people think that if it's not a nicotine cigarette, it's not going to impact, and that's not accurate. It is impacting their lungs. It's impacting their ability to breathe. Anyone that might have already a condition of asthma or any of that, that's going to impact them, and they're going to be impacted a little bit more heavily than someone that may not have some of those medical conditions. Mm-hmm. So, and again, nicotine is addictive. When you're vaping and you're getting a steady dose of that nicotine, it's going to cause the brain to become dependent. That's why it's so hard to let go of it. And some teens do struggle where they're like, I really don't want to do this anymore, but they're not sure how to break that because their body and their mind is still desiring it when they're having those cravings or tempting situations.
Yeah. The next question is, Bridget, you work a lot with children and families in our Common Sense Parenting classes, so I'm sure you've discussed this in your classes, but how do I know if my child is vaping? And Natasha too can touch on this, but what are some of the warning signs?
I think, there'll be an increase in their secrecy, spending less time at home. This sweet scent that comes with them when they come into your home.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, Seeing some unfamiliar USB ports around or pins. Drinking lots of water. They have constant nose bleeds. They're a little bit more irritable. That's kind of hard to say with teenagers, but a little bit more than they usually are. They tend to their spending habits might be an issue, not seeming to have money a lot, but they just got some money. So, a coughing, a hacking cough, sore throats, um,
Mhm.
having wanting new batteries or charges all the time. You just might find these discarded vape pods around that look really cute. Like, what is that? You might not recognize them. But I think when you begin to see any and all of these signs or a few of these signs, some red flags should go off, and then it's a time for you to, act. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Anything? Did I miss anything, Natasha? What else do you find as far as yeah?
You know, Changing their communication efforts with mom or dad. That
Mhm.
might be a warning sign as well. Just kind
Mhm.
of one of those things we always tell parents, if you kind of start sitting back going, what's going on?
Yeah.
Something's a little bit different. That's
Mhm.
that's a good opportunity to check in. It doesn't mean you're going to assume it's the nicotine, but you want to keep that insight going, keep the communication checking in, because I think what happens is if they're falling into experimenting or more and more use, we're going to see more and more of that sneaky covert behavior. And
Mhm.
these vapes are small. It doesn't, we now have the fruity scent, not the yucky cigarette scent, but you got to kind of watch out for some of those things. And it's different now than what it was in the past. So yeah,
Right.
parents staying attuned to those things um, is a great opportunity to be checking in with your kiddos.
Mhm. Yeah. So we just have a few more questions here for Bridget and Natasha. So if you are watching live and you have a question on vaping, now would be the time to comment to ensure we can get it answered here in time during the live. Bridget, the next question is, what can I do as a parent to talk to my child if they are vaping and help them work towards stopping?
Well, I think, inviting your child to talk, always having that door open, whether it's the ride home from school or you're, at bedtime, just always letting them know you're there to listen to them. If I kind of feel like some of those red flags are going up that this kid might be vaping, and I would have them read about it and explain to me what are the effects of this thing that you might be into. I'm not. Well, let's just read about about this, and you tell me. I'm not going to lecture to you about it. You need to be patient and be ready, really ready to listen to kids about why they're smoking and how they're feeling, because some of the is at the core of what they're doing, right? And try to understand their feelings. You might not, but try to have that open perspective from their point of view about their fears, their anxieties, and not just say, well, that's not a big deal if your friends don't like that or whatever. Just try to hear them out and avoid judging them. I think it's really important for parents to kind of take that on and understand that kids have feelings. They don't always deal with them correctly, but that's why we're there to hear them and then try to problem solve. It isn't like, okay, this is the problem, just knock it off. Now we have to figure this out, because Natasha was saying earlier, this is not only the physical, but it's a mental, and their surroundings, everything is bombarding them at once. And so you really do have to help them walk through and know that they might fail a couple of times. Getting off of nicotine is not an easy thing to do. People spend a whole life trying to do that. So I think that, you really have to have a plan, be okay with failing, and then fail better the next time. And listening to kids and getting more help. Know when you're out of your depth, when you need more support for your family, and get that support.
Mhm.
And I'll just add, early on education isn't just about learning about the effects, it's also for parents connecting why it's important for their child.
Hmm.
What are the values that child has that if they did this, it could impact that? And using teachable moments where maybe you're watching TV together and there's someone on there vaping, or there's an educational advertisement about the effects of it. Have a little dialogue.
Mhm.
Those little teachable moments one, you're providing the education, but two, it also allows them to dialogue back on what they might know about it, or what they're experiencing, or what they're seeing. And that really allows for some trust to be built, that if they're in a bad situation or they do something, they might come and say, Mom, I screwed up. I did this. I tried the vape. It was kind of yucky, or I felt pressured, any of those things, so that you can guide them, because they don't know. They're in this, they're figuring it out, they're trying to learn. And sometimes they do make bad mistakes and they might feel a little guilty about it. But if they can come to you and talk about it, that's where you can work together to really help them.
I love that, Natasha. I mean, because it goes to the point of catching them when they're younger, and we're seeing them happening when it's, they're 13 or so. So we're talking about that early on. I love that. Prevention is the key. Yes, I love it.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so we've got two more questions on my list, and then I see one coming into the comments, so we'll make sure we get that answered here. So, Natasha, what should I do if my child is either struggling to quit vaping or does not have a desire to quit?
Okay. So if they're struggling with it, my hope is that there's some dialogue with mom and dad about what they're struggling with, or what the circumstances are that are hard. And that might give mom or dad some idea of whether they need to seek therapeutic support or an outside support if they're just not sure how to help them, or maybe they've made suggestions and they haven't been working like they thought maybe they would. And if a kiddo's really resistant, you got to be patient with that, right? Because sometimes you don't want to keep battling back and forth and getting more and more opposition because of the way the dialogue is. So sometimes you might need to take a time out. You know what? We're going to talk about this tomorrow. It sounds like you're really struggling with not wanting to quit, but we're really concerned about this, and kind of taking a little break and then coming back and revisiting expectations. Or the concern. And if they're really, really digging their feet in, that's where there is some support out in the community for helping families kind of determine what kind of support they can get outside of within their own family system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bridget, do you have anything to add?
No, I think, Natasha's spot on with that. I would say that sometimes kids start breaking family rules. I mean, if you're late on a curfew, you're late on a curfew, vaping or no. There's a consequence for breaking rules, and that we need to talk about that. But not only, losing things, but how do you earn that back? How do you earn back that trust? What should you be doing in order to, make different choices and learning how to problem solve better? Because I won't be around everywhere you are.
Right.
And so, teaching them how to be able to do those things and how to be able to deal with peer pressure and practicing that so that they get better at that.
The other thing that comes to mind as well is if they're really adamant about not quitting, finding out why. What is it that they really, really can't see themselves not using the vape? And maybe it is fear of breaking free of the addiction or of the pattern of use, because habits are hard to break. So learning a little bit more about why there's that apprehension, and providing alternative solutions for why it works for them or what they like so much about it.
Yeah, I talked to a young man, was doing some presentation for young people, and this conversation, among many other things, came up, and he didn't have an answer for that. And I said, well, then I really want you to think about it, and I'm going to come back again, and I want to see where you're at with that question, because if you don't know, who will? Why you don't want to stop?
Yeah.
So I think just putting it out there, because sometimes we don't ask the question, and kids don't know. No one ever asked them.
Right.
Yeah. So my last question here before I get into the comment section is, what other words of wisdom or advice do you both have for families trying to either prevent their child from vaping, or if they need help finding the care to help them stop doing so? So Bridget, if you want to start.
Well, I just believe, when one person is struggling with something, the entire family's involved. If someone has got an addiction, the entire family is affected by that. And so you cannot just say, well, that's just Johnny's problem. So if you're feeling helpless, if you're feeling like you don't know which way to turn to Boys Town. we're here. Natasha, the chemical use program, excellent program to start out with. Get assessment, talk to someone, get some great ideas. Definitely come to a common sense parenting class. Sometimes other parents can tell you what they went through, and you don't feel alone. And they can tell you what service supports they use for their kiddos and what programs out there. They even have, and I can't. Maybe Natasha knows. You know how we have the smoke alarm? They actually have this this alarm for vaping that can smell that sweet smell, just in case the parents can or whatever. And and the kids like arguing, I don't. Like, no, no, no. See, you stand there, it goes off, and it's not. So, different things that parents have shared with me on coping, teaching kids coping skills could be helpful. We have parenting.org, lots of articles up there, our hotlines, just too many places to get support. So I would start here at Boys Town. It would be a good place to start.
Mhm.
Yeah. So how do we get in touch with the chemical use program if we are interested in using their services?
So we are on the Boys Town website. Through the hotline too, you can connect, and then we have an intake administration intake line that you can call and let us know what's going on with your kiddo, and that kiddo would be connected with a clinician or the director and get them assigned to a therapist so we can get them the support and help that the family needs and the youth needs.
Mm-hmm. So we linked here in the comment section our direct link, so it goes right to Natasha's page on the Boys Town parenting site, and you can get in touch directly from that. It has the phone number she mentioned and everything. Okay, so we have 2 questions here in the comment section. Thank you for your question. So the first one is talking about prevention, as we mentioned. When is the best age to intervene from a prevention standpoint?
I think when anytime a kid is, ready to have that conversation and they're exposed to things, or it just might, I think Natasha said it, you're watching a show and there is vaping in my kid's face. I'm not going to ignore that opportunity. And he might be, he's not 3, but he might be old enough to know what vaping is and be exposed to it. Yes, that's just a perfect opportunity. So just really kind of, I don't know if there's any particular age group per se, but I would say preteen is a good time to kind of have that on your list of things we're going to go over, but pick, the opportunity when it arises, being prepared as a parent. So I think you should start right now as a parent, studying up, getting informed, knowing information. So when that moment does arise, you're ready.
Right. And they may come to you at various ages. Hey, mommy, what is that? Or, and appropriate to where they're at age wise, you can already start kind of putting out that information about the risk or that it's not healthy. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great question. And then we have one more that says, do you have a recommendation for virtual cessation programs or resources for the school to provide students and parents? So maybe Natasha, if you want to touch on what the clinic gives out to schools or recommendations for that.
So yeah, there's a lot of prevention programs online. On vaping. So if you go into online for vaping, I don't have a specific website that we use.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we try and link families up with some of the education programs. There's a lot of schools right now that are working on developing those. SAMHSA.org has several pamphlets for parents, how to talk to their parents about, or how for the parents to talk to the kiddos about nicotine use.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we went ahead and linked several resources in the comment section, including a landing page that has all the other Common Sense Parenting Third Thursday live videos that Bridget and I have done. And we've covered, over the years, so many different topics. So I encourage you to watch those. Next month is Mental Health Month, with it being May. So we're going to be talking about that with Natalie Jensen from the Behavioral Health Clinic, as well as Bridget Barnes. So looking forward to that. But for now, thank you all for tuning into this live. Natasha and Bridget, thank you so much for your expertise.
Yeah, Natasha, I hope you come back because I don't think this is a one-time conversation.
Yes, we will have you back.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.